Welcome to our first online recorded lecture. This joke here is from a show called BoJack Horseman, which, if you're all in quarantine, you should catch up on and watch. It's hilarious. Anyways, we are all in this together. We're going to get through this. It's going to be a little weird. We're going to have a little road bump, but we will get through it. So let's start. First of all, I don't care if you're listening to this on double speed, on triple speed, if you're paying attention to something else. Just please listen to the entire thing every week. I'm going to have important info here, and we're not going to be able to see each other face to face. So it's going to be very much your all responsibility to make sure you're paying attention and getting things turned in on time. So let's start. Due today, we have a draft of scale items. Obviously, we can't talk about them in class, but you're going to upload them to the discussion board. I will talk about that more when we get there. Next week, we have proposal assignment 3 due, which is your second article critique. So we're going to talk more about that right now. So what we're going to do today is discuss proposal assignment 2, the one that was graded and returned back to you. We're going to discuss our scale items and then proposal assignment 3. So here's some examples of good article critiques. I want to talk about proposal assignment 2 because proposal assignment 3 is the exact same assignment, and I don't want anyone getting marked down for things that I already marked them down on, because you should be learning from those mistakes. So I'm sorry if I embarrass anyone, but I have some examples of good article critiques. The good thing about this is we're not doing this as an entire class, so if this is your article that I bring up, no one's going to stare at you. So overall, be clear. I had to take off a lot of points because students were writing information but not saying what that information meant. So when I say in section 1 that we need you to write the conceptual variables, make sure you say the conceptual variable is and write it. When I say I need you to tell me what the operationalized variable is, make sure you say the operationalization of my variable is. I can't assume that you know that. So even if you're writing, my variable was mood, was that your conceptual one? Was that your operationalized one? Just be clear. Use spell check and check your grammar. I had a lot of spelling mistakes and a lot of grammar mistakes. It just shouldn't happen. Those are just points you don't need to get taken off. Read it to yourself a couple times before you turn it in. If you have trouble with grammar or if you have trouble writing in English, there's writing centers, there's resources for that. Then again, our writing center might be shut down right now, so just do what you can, but be sure to check those things. Also, my biggest tip for you is to look at the assignment sheet. We very clearly list everything we're grading for in the assignment sheet and every question you need to address. So just go through and make sure you're addressing everything. If you're answering every question to the best of your ability, you're going to do a fine job on the assignments. And the biggest issue was leaving out information. So you can write an entire paragraph on a section, but if you missed answering one of the questions, then I can't give you full points. So for example, the last section had a question about if you were to operationalize the variables differently, do you think you'd find the same results, or something to that effect? And a lot of people just didn't answer that question. Not maybe in a roundabout way, but just mostly not at all. Just be sure you're answering every question. So section 1, we had what are the primary conceptual IVs and DVs and what is the primary hypothesis. This is a good example of section 1. I'm going to read it and then we'll talk about the sections that are good. The hypothesis of this article is that consumers will observe products to be higher quality if they are produced by a brand with an intrinsic motivation for producing its products rather than extrinsic motivation. Very clear, just telling me here's what the hypothesis of the article is. In this experiment, the level of quality in which a consumer perceives a product is the primary conceptual dependent variable, and whether the brand that produced the product has intrinsic or extrinsic motivation for producing its products is the primary conceptual independent variable. Do you see how clear that is? It is very obviously laid out which is the independent, which is the dependent, and that they are conceptual and not operationalized. Very clear, very to the point, excellent paragraph. Section 2 is all about participants, how they were selected, the operationalization of your variables, and the procedure. So let's read this one. Participants in the study were 10,353 British children who were 99% Caucasian. They were selected because they were all born during the week of March 3rd through March 9th of 1958. Very clear. Who are the participants and why were they selected? Why and how? If your paper doesn't say why or how the participants were selected, you can say something like, it will probably say something about why or how they were selected. It's either the population of interest or something like they found them online. Any information about how they were selected or why, you should try to include. And if there's literally no information about that, you can say that, and I'll be able to check that because you turn in your PDF with it, but try to include something. Next, we have the operationalization. In the case of predictor variable of divorce, Chase Lansdale et al. Defined it as including both divorces and separations. The predictor variable was measured by interviewing all the children, some with divorced parents and some with non-divorced parents. The outcome variable of mental health and well-being was measured at age 23 using the Malaise inventory, which addresses psychiatric morbidity. The predictor variable of gender was measured during interviews. The study was a longitudinal correlational study. At the ages of 7, 11, and 16, interviews were conducted with each of the subjects. Information was also obtained at each of these ages by teachers, school nurses, and parents of the children as well. So operationalization is very clear there. We're saying the predictor variable of gender was measured by, for example, the outcome variable of mental health and well-being was measured at age 23 using this specific inventory. So you're telling me how these things were measured. In terms of the procedure, we see it was a longitudinal study. They were measured at 3 different ages, interviews were conducted, information was obtained, etc. The procedure doesn't have to be very detailed, but just give me an example or a walkthrough of what happened in the study. Section 3, we have what statistical tests were used, what did the authors find, and was the hypothesis supported or not? So this is a different study, or a different paper. We have, to investigate the hypothesis that neurofeedback training reduces rates of cigarette craving, Bu et al. Performed a 2-way mixed design ANOVA using group as a between subjects factor and time as a within subjects factor. That's a very detailed answer. Simply saying they use a 2-way design ANOVA would suffice, but this is a great example. You need to state what tests were used. You can't just say they ran tests. What tests? What did they actually test? Then we have, this analysis revealed a significant group by time interaction on cigarette craving score. At pre-neurofeedback, there was no significant craving score between the two groups. However, after the 2 neurofeedback visits, the real feedback group, the treatment group, had a significantly decreased cigarette craving score than the yoked feedback group, thus supporting the hypothesis that neurofeedback training reduces rates of cigarette craving. This is an excellent paragraph. It tells us exactly what the authors found, and specifically, was the hypothesis supported or not? A lot of people also miss that. You can't just give the results and let me figure out for myself if the hypothesis was supported. You need to specifically say, do these results support the hypothesis that I laid out in section 1? Lastly, section 4. Were the conceptual variables the same, meaning the same as what you were planning on testing? If not, what will they be? Will you operationalize them the same way? And would you find support if you operationalize them differently? Here's a great example of that. The conceptual variables were similar to mine, but not exactly the same. So answering the question. I will focus on the gender roles dealt with in the study because I want to see if PTSD is more common among the genders depending on similar and differing traumatic events. So, saying the conceptual variables are mostly the same, but I want to do this part a little bit differently. If I had the same abilities as the researchers in the study, I would operationalize my variables in a similar way because I feel it is the best way to pull a sample about traumatic events without having to create an artificial experience. Also, administering a diagnostic test is one of the best ways to gather large amounts of psychological data from many people in a population. So, would you operationalize the same way? Very clearly, yes, I would do that. Lastly, I feel that I would find support for my hypothesis using this operationalization strategy as opposed to another type because this is the most direct source of testing without running into ethical issues or taking too much time to research and collect data. So would you find support and why? Very, very clear paragraph. Okay, so that's everything about the about paper 2 going into paper 3. Paper 3 is the exact same instructions, the exact same everything. You need to send me the PDF. You can do the same thing to email it to me if you can't attach it to the Canvas link. This is due, that is next Wednesday. Sorry, I'm just looking at my agenda here. So this Wednesday is the 18th. This is due, let me go back here, the 25th, Wednesday the 25th. And I'm going to say that's due at midnight. Wednesday the 25th at midnight. The Canvas will be updated to show that. Let me write that down. Update proposal 3. Okay, so let's go on. Now we'll go on to reviewing scales. So you've already been assigned a group. Let me show you real quick. If you go onto Canvas, and I'm going to do student view, and you go into groups, or people, which is on the side right here if you see my mouse. People. And then if you click on this groups tab, you'll see all these groups that have been made, and you can click on them and see who is in what group, who is in your group with you. Now what you're going to do for this assignment is go into the discussions tab on the left here, click on this scale assignment, and here you'll see my message that you've all been assigned groups of 3 to 4 people. What you're going to do is post your discussion here in a Word document. And what I mean by your discussion is your scale assignment. So you're going to post your scale assignment. Go back to the PowerPoint. You're going to post your scale assignment in a Word document. You're going to download everybody in your group's scale assignment. So you should have 3 to 4 people. And you're going to make suggestions on it via track changes in Word and re-upload it to the discussion board. What track changes means, if I open Microsoft Word up, let me open document. For example, this is just some document I'm working on. If I go to view, so I already have view markup on, you're going to need to do that. And if you want to do track changes, you go to Tools, Track Changes, Highlight Changes, Track Changes while editing. And what that means is if I delete something, it shows up here. See? Or if I want to make a comment, let's say scale, there's some scale item, and I don't like it. I can highlight it, go to Insert Comment, and write, this should be revised, ... Zoom in a little bit right here. So what you're going to do after that is you save your document where you're supplying feedback, and you re-upload it to this discussion board right here. That is going to serve as your participation points, your scale assignment points, and your attendance. So do all of that. Now, what feedback you should be providing. You should give suggestions for adding, deleting, or modifying items to measure the construct more effectively and improve the clarity of the items. Make sure when you're posting that you talk about what construct you're measuring so that your group members know. And of course, if you're the scale developer, you should take notes on these suggestions and maybe implement them into your scale. So group members, you can say this item is too long, this item is too short, this item is confusing, this item isn't measuring what you think it is, whatever sort of suggestions you have. So the last thing on this weird online lecture, article critique number 2. So be sure to read suggestions in the feedback and consider them when writing your second article review. This is due at our next lab. The lab that I'm recording this for is March 18th, meaning our next lab is March 25th. Please go over the comments I gave on your papers. I tried to give comments for every point that was taken off. And don't make the same mistakes twice. If you need help, let me know. And you're welcome to set up virtual office hours with me, or you can email me, whatever you want to do. And please, if you have feedback on this, how this first virtual lecture went, please let me know. This is new to me in terms of uploading a screen share. So just let me know. But thank you, everyone.